so much pressure. So we've got the pandemic at the moment where people are beginning to really, the conversations about well-being and coping with the situation, you know, supporting learners at a younger age to reflect and process what's going on and develop those approaches themselves, you know. So becoming more self-directed, more self-aware, which in the end is, for universities, should be such an asset, because I mean, as you mentioned, Claudia, you're talking about attrition rates, people dropping out. That's an enormous problem for universities, and a lot of it is because it's not because of intelligence or whatever you want to call it. It's people arriving and either not having the they're not ready with the learning skills, you know, set to be self-directed in that transition from high school to university, or they haven't actually had the space and the support to connect with their purpose. And so they arrive, and the thing that the internal motivation that should be propelling them forward isn't there. And these people are dropping out of university thinking that they're not up to it. And that story, this is the great tragedy, that story follows them through their life. I dropped out, I wasn't ready, and it's not their fault, you know? So with all of this increasing awareness, the old arguments of it's for industry disappearing, how much longer are we talking? 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? When is this when is the house of cards going to fall down?
I believe that in order to changes and revolutions to happen, there must be a cultural change. And I have seen some sparks here and there, but still the culture has reinforced. Remember, universities were founded hundreds of years ago, right? That in order to be successful, you must have a formal education. So to change that paradigm, not only in the students, but also in their parents and in the environment around. Say, why is your young daughter, young son not at university? What is he doing? Oh no, he's studying by himself. People will be like, what? That's very strange. So it's a matter of also parents letting go and giving space. And that's to ask a lot. You know, if you are parents, you know it's not easy. It's an act of love, actually. And then you have on the other side, the social also standard that you must have a degree in order to be successful in life. Right now in Peru, there's a change and people are thinking that technical education, let's say the 3-year degree, will help you. And it's true, there is more demand of jobs of technical skills, degrees, rather than higher education bachelor's degrees. But still you have, and to your question, Mark, many students at the university that you can tell that they will be prosperous if they had gone to the technical school and then started working, doing their entrepreneurship goal, and then grow from there. So let's see how it goes in the, I would say in the future 2 years. I believe it's going to be critical to understand this paradigm change that we need.
I don't often make predictions about time, but it's a really interesting question. More and more, well, I think it's a matter of choice. I think the more leaders and positions of influence self-examine and make very conscious choices about the future we want to co-create, that will determine the timeline and also the intensity of the, as Claudia said, the revolution that is just upon us. I think it's inevitable, whether it's being driven by climate change or economic challenges or, you know, migrations or any of the other issues. And one of the interesting questions is this a matter of privilege? Like, is it just the privileged that get to find their purpose and everybody else has to work really hard to get a credential in order to get a job and a living wage? And I don't think that's the question, because I think we can choose what we're modeling our systems on. And if lately I've been thinking about like the forest as an analogy for systems change. And, you know, there's a lot of technology in the forest. There's a lot of community and accomplishment and success and balance in the forest. And sort of there's competition too, but everybody gets a chance. So I'm imagining this big tree, you know, and it's in canopy and it's sensing the weather and the wind and the sunlight. And there's all these little trees underneath it that are growing, and they're all equally trees, you know, they're valid young saplings. And what's really happening, the tree isn't sitting there like looking down, pointing a finger saying, you all need some prerequisites and test scores if you really want to be a tree like me. I mean, that tree is underneath the ground. There's this web, you know, this weaving of roots and rhizomes and recycling fungus that's just communicating. It's just nurturing, letting each of them have a chance. If they find the conditions to reach the sunlight, great. If they don't grow that way, but they grow a little differently, that's okay too. It's a question of what do we want to model? Do we want to model sort of the widget, you know, industry kind of economy? Or do we want to model, you know, an interconnected community? And a lot of us in positions of administrative or, you know, innovative spaces can have a lot of influence. I mean, the power of one person to put forth a new idea in their existing system, higher ed or the workforce or government, is not to be underestimated. So it, you know, it's, yes, it's the wider system, but it's also a very individual time to step forward and live by your values.
I just love this analogy, David. I'm yeah.
Me too. I'm a tree hugger.
I'm picturing it, literally.
Yeah.
And,
yes,
and
I do.
actually, yeah, actually, David, then my question is now, if I know you don't like predictions, but you came with this analogy of the tree. So now the question is, if you were to be the master of the forest, okay, the forest being the whole ecosystem, and you had a magic wand to choose one thing that you don't see today in the forest, what would you like those big and little trees to have?
If the forest is an educational system,
Mm-hmm.
then it's respect and dignity. So if the interactions between the teachers and the young people are grounded in the present moment, the agenda is not the outcomes and the grades and the graduation, but the agenda is the health of that young tree, then you meet them with deep respect, deep listening. You're looking for clues about who they are, who could they become, how do they construct their world. And that's that sort of facilitated learning that's multidimensional. It's a million times richer than pushing them through a bespoke agenda of training. And I don't say this with the sense that training and technical skills don't matter. They do. They're a means to it having the impact we want in our lives. We need training. What I'm saying is, if we start with dignity and respect at the human interaction level, and we don't think about scale and mass producing trees, you can't do that. We just start with authenticity. The rest will come. The outcomes will be there. The economy will be there. The new industries will emerge, and they'll be wildly exceeding today what we think is possible, because we've all grown up in a history of time where we can't imagine a broader paradigm. We think that the world must be competitive, conflictual, it's based on scarcity and racism, but that's only because our memory is only going back a couple generations. And that's what seems to frame our thinking. But that's actually not the case. There are other possibilities and other models. We have the planetary kind of ecological interdependence now is very well understood even by science. And so we can think in a new way today without some of these traditional limitations that are not actually in the nature of our society.
Fully agree. Claudia, you got some time to think.
Well, with the analogy of the forest, I was already marvelous. What I have in these years in education and the past, even the transition, no? I was, for example, raised by nuns, and the nuns were more into the memoristic kind of education. Then I went to a great university here in Peru, Católica University, and as I always say, they taught me to learn, but especially to think. And that's when I went through a process that allowed me to even boom in my brain in many ways. So when I'm working at the university, that is my passion, to understand that everybody has their own set of skills or interests that they want to develop, and each one has their own potential. And for them, there is a chance for the students now that maybe was not in my time, that you could even tailor your experiences. Right now, they're considered like extracurricular experiences, but in reality, they should be the curriculum experiences. Like, for example, traveling abroad, right? Doing like a volunteering activities. It should be part within the curricula, included all that. So students try to figure out how to make their own profile of interest. And as we all know, they continue maturing on those years, right? They become, especially depending on the culture, from dependent to independent. So when you start doing that process, you figure out first that you have to be social, but also with empathy. And right now, a huge word is ethical behavior, which is another broad concept that needs to be learned and practiced and should be part of any curriculum right now. So with all that process of transformation that happens, for example, in Peru in 5 years, in the US in 4, and Canada in 4 years, or less in Europe in 3, there should be a maturity in the student that it goes in the formal process. Now, what happens with the other ones that choose, I would say, the new and the innovative way? First of all, they have to deal with cultural resistance that I have mentioned before, family goals that have been set on their shoulders with them even knowing. And with that, as you were saying also a moment ago, all the dropouts, they leave thinking that they were not capable enough. In my experience, I have seen many dropouts doing amazingly afterwards. They give conferences, they write books, they have a path, they have a career, and you see them building like Mike's wall in the back, like with little bricks, their own learning experience, and they continue to do so. So during the pandemic, this could be exacerbated even more, and we have seen students beginning their own entrepreneurship startups right now, in pandemia and in lockdowns even, which tells us also a lot of that will that we humans have in order first to adapt and to learn. So I'm a believer that there should be a softer understanding, not relaxed, a softer, that there are other ways in which each of us will have their own path.